The night the elders came to my door, the stars refused to shine. Clouds gathered like mourning veils across the heavens, and even the crickets silenced their song. Our hearth burned low, painting our small hut in amber shadows. I was kneading dough when the knock came. 3 firm raps, measured and grave, the kind that carries a verdict. My mother looked up, her hands stilling on the spindle. "Stay quiet," she whispered, though she knew it was useless. The elders never came without reason. When I opened the door, the cold rushed in first, sharp as a blade, smelling of pine and sorrow. Elder Samir stood before me, his gray beard tangled with frost, his eyes heavy with something more than age. 2 others flanked him, their lanterns trembling in the wind. "Layla," Samir said softly, "the village calls upon your courage." I wanted to ask why me, but the words lodged behind my ribs. Everyone in the valley knew what those words meant. Someone was being asked to give what could not be returned. "Come," he said, "we must speak by your fire." They entered with the weight of storm clouds. My mother poured water for tea, though her hands shook so hard the cups rattled. When all were seated, Samir unrolled an ancient scroll across the table. The wax seal bore the mark of the first guardians, a sword encircled by a sun now cracked and faded. "You know of the cursed warrior," he began. The name alone chilled me. "Kyle," I whispered, though it felt forbidden to speak it aloud. "The one who fought the Northern War." "Aye," said Samir. "He was our champion once, the savior of this valley. But when the sorcerer of the Black Mountain fell, he uttered a dying curse. Kale's light was stolen. He became bound to shadow, cursed to wander between death and life, bringing misfortune wherever he treads. The fields wither, the animals sicken, the children dream of blood. You have seen it. I had. Our harvests had failed 3 years in a row. The wells had turned bitter. The night itself seemed longer, as though the moon feared to look upon us. "Why come to me?" I asked. "I am no priestess." Samir's eyes softened, pity and purpose tangled within. "The prophecy says, when darkness takes the warrior's heart, only a willing bride of light may break his chain. We have searched for one who would go to him. None dared." The room was silent but for the hiss of the fire. My mother's breath caught. "You would send my daughter to that creature?" Samir bowed his head. "If the curse continues, the valley will die before spring. Layla, we ask not as elders, but as people who love this land. You are pure of heart, and brave enough to walk where others tremble." My mother's eyes met mine, tired eyes, worn by too many losses. I knew what she was thinking. We have nothing left to lose. I turned to the fire, watching the dough rise on the stone near its edge. It seemed absurd, this small act of living in the face of doom. "If I go," I said, "and I fail?" Samir's answer was quiet. "Then the darkness will claim us all." The silence that followed was its own kind of storm. I thought of the children with hollow cheeks, of the mothers who prayed to empty skies. I thought of my father, who had died saving a neighbor's child in a flood. His courage had left its mark in me like a scar. "I will go," I said finally. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Layla." "I will go," I repeated. "If my heart can buy the dawn for us, let it be spent." Samir's eyes glimmered with both grief and relief. "Then may the old gods guard you, child." He left before the fire dimmed, and my mother stood in silence for a long time. Then, quietly, she fetched my father's old knife and pressed it into my palm. "When you find him," she said, "remember, mercy can be sharper than steel." I nodded. We said no more. Words would have broken what little strength we had left. At moonrise, I set out. The path to the mountain was silver and cold, each step echoing against the cliffs. The wind whispered like the breath of forgotten souls. The ruins of Kale's fortress rose from the dark earth ahead, crumbling stone veined with frost and memory. At its gate, I paused. My lantern flickered as though warning me back. Inside, the air was thick, the shadows alive. "Kale," I called, my voice trembling only once. "I come not to fight you, but to free you." For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a voice, deep as thunder beneath the earth, rolled through the darkness. "Then you are a fool, or a martyr." And from the blackness, he stepped forth. His armor was shattered, his eyes hollow moons. But beneath the ruin of him, something flickered, something almost human. My breath caught. "Then I shall be both," I whispered. And the darkness closed around us. The sound of his footsteps echoed like thunder inside the hollowed fortress. Kyle, the cursed warrior. His name was a wound on every tongue that dared speak it, and now he stood before me. He was taller than any man I had ever seen, shoulders broad beneath the ruin of his armor. The plates were cracked and scorched as though he had walked through fire that never died. His eyes, pale as smoke, carried centuries of silence. Around him, the air itself seemed to bend, a shroud of restless shadow that moved like a living thing. For a long while he only stared at me. Then his voice came, deep and rough, like a blade dragged over stone. "You should not have come here." "I was sent," I said, forcing my voice steady. "The curse that binds you is killing my people. I came to end it." His laughter was hollow, soft, bitter. "Many have come to end it. None have left alive." I swallowed. "Then I will be the first." He studied me for a heartbeat that seemed to last an age. "You are not a warrior." "No, but I carry courage enough." "Courage," he said, and something flickered in his tone, almost human. "That was the first thing the curse took from me." I raised my lantern. "Let me see your face." The shadows recoiled. His face emerged. Beautiful once, I could tell, though now it bore the marks of a life shattered. A scar ran from temple to jaw, and faint veins of darkness pulsed under his skin like living ink. When my gaze met his, I felt the pull of something vast. Grief, rage, and loneliness woven into one unending ache. He stepped closer, and my breath caught. "If you know what I am, girl, then you know I am beyond saving." "No one is beyond saving," I whispered. He laughed again, softer this time. "Then you are a fool." "Perhaps, but I am a fool who made a vow." I reached into my cloak and drew a strip of red cloth, the same one my mother had tied around my braids since I was a child. "I came not to beg for mercy, but to offer it. I will marry you, Kale of the Shadows, if my vow can break your curse." The darkness around him stirred like a storm. "You would bind yourself to a monster?" "I would bind myself to hope." He stared at me, silent for so long that I feared he would strike me down where I stood. Then, slowly, he turned his face away. "You do not understand what this means. A vow freely given can awaken what was buried. But the curse will fight. It will claw through flesh and soul alike. I am not afraid." He met my eyes again, and for a heartbeat, something softened. "Then you are brave," he said quietly, "or doomed." We wed that same night in the ruins of the ancient chapel deep within the fortress. The air was thick with dust and forgotten prayers. The moon shone through a broken roof, spilling silver over cracked stone. Kale stood opposite me, holding a blade across his palms. Its edge gleamed faintly, not with light, but with the ghost of it. "Blood seals all things," he said. "It was blood that cursed me. It must be blood that frees me." He drew the blade across his hand, and dark smoke rose from the wound instead of crimson. The scent was of iron and sorrow. When he offered the blade to me, I hesitated only a moment before cutting my palm. Our blood mingled upon the altar. His shadow flared like a living flame, rising toward the rafters, clawing at the air. The stone beneath us trembled. A whisper filled the chapel, thousands of voices murmuring in a forgotten tongue. Kale fell to his knees, gasping, his body convulsing under invisible chains. I dropped beside him, pressing my wounded hand to his chest. "Stay with me!" His eyes burned, not white, not black, but gold, a color that had not belonged to him for centuries. "Your vow," he rasped. "It's working." The light burst outward, washing the walls in silver. I felt it pour through me like water through sand, stealing my strength, but I held on. I would not let go. When the trembling stopped, Kyle lay motionless. His shadow had grown quieter, thinner, as though it had been drained. I touched his cheek. It was warm, truly warm. "You live," I whispered. He opened his eyes, their glow fading to something gentler. "You are either blessed or cursed, wife of the dark." "Then we share the same fate," I said. He smiled, barely, but it was real. "Layla," he murmured, my name on his tongue like a prayer long forgotten. "You may yet wake the man I once was." That night, as the mountain wind howled through the cracks of the fortress, I lay awake beside him. His breathing was rough, uneven, but alive. I stared at the ceiling and thought of my village, of the faces I had left behind. Perhaps they would see dawn again. Perhaps, in this ruin of darkness, love could still find a way to bloom. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of silence, flame, and fear. Kyle slept for 3 sunrises, though no sun touched this cursed mountain. I stayed beside him, tending the small fire I'd built from brittle roots and old beams scavenged from the ruin. His breath was uneven, his skin cold as river stone, but his pulse, weak and stubborn, beat on. Each time his shadow stirred against the wall, I whispered his name. "Kyle, you're not alone anymore." Sometimes I thought the darkness listened. Sometimes I thought it hated me for it. When he finally opened his eyes, I was too tired to speak. He stared at the ceiling as though it were a sky he no longer trusted. "You're still here," he rasped. "I said I would be." He tried to rise, but pain folded him back. "You should have left when the vow took hold. It will mark you, Layla. The curse does not share its cage willingly." I reached for his hand. "Then let it mark me. Every scar it gives me will remind me why I came." He turned his face toward me, eyes dim but alive. "You are a strange kind of savior, and you are a strange kind of monster," I said softly. That earned me a ghost of a smile, the first I had seen. We built our days slowly, like children stacking stones against a flood. Kale showed me how to find the underground springs that whispered through the mountain's heart. I taught him to cook stew over the fire without burning it black. He scowled at my laughter, but I could see how it unsettled the shadows. They recoiled each time warmth filled the air. One night, as I mended his torn cloak, I asked, "What was it like before the curse?" He grew quiet. The flames trembled in their bowl of stone. "I remember light," he said finally. "It had weight. It bent over the fields when the wheat was gold. I remember laughter, though I can't recall whose. And I remember the night it ended." He told me then of the sorcerer, the man who envied Kale's valor. During the war, the sorcerer had promised Kale victory in exchange for his loyalty. Kale refused. And so, upon the battlefield's ash, the dying mage spat his vengeance. "You will live when all light dies around you." From that moment, every dawn fled from him. The world became a wound he could not close. As he spoke, his voice faltered. I reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his brow. "Then we'll find a new kind of light," I said. "One that doesn't fear your shadow." He looked at me then, not as a savior, nor as a stranger, but as something he could almost believe in. "If I hurt you," he murmured, "it will be the curse's will, not mine." "You won't," I said, though I could not know for certain. That night, the whispering began. It came from the deepest halls of the fortress, soft, distant, and cold. At first I thought it was wind through the broken stones, but then, beneath the murmur, I heard my name, spoken with a voice like silk tearing. Layla. I froze. Kyle, half asleep beside the dying fire, stirred. "What is it?" he asked. "Something's here." He rose in one motion, eyes burning faintly. "Stay behind me." The whisper turned to laughter, low, mocking, familiar. Kyle's breath caught, and for an instant I saw fear flash across his face. "It knows me," he said. "It's part of the curse." The shadows along the wall thickened, shaping themselves into vague forms, faces without eyes, arms like smoke. The air grew heavy with the scent of iron and rot. "Kyle," I whispered, clutching his arm. "What do they want?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, hand raised, voice firm. "You've taken enough from me. You'll take nothing from her." The darkness shrieked, a sound that shattered the air. The fire blew out. I felt hands of cold drag at my dress, clawing toward my heart. I screamed. Then Kale's voice roared through the black. "By my blood, by her vow, you are bound." Light burst from his chest, silver and violent. The shadows recoiled, folding inward like torn cloth, and vanished. When the stillness returned, I collapsed against him, trembling. "What were they?" He exhaled shakily. "Memories. Fragments of all the souls my curse devoured. They are restless now, because you've weakened the chain." I swallowed hard. "Then we're making progress." He managed a faint laugh. "You call this progress?" "I call it proof," I said. "The curse fights hardest when it's afraid to die." He looked at me, and this time there was pride in his eyes. "You're not just brave, Layla. You're dangerous." I smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we deserve each other." That night, after the terror faded and the fire was lit again, Kyle sat beside me in silence. Finally, he said, "If I ever lose control, if the curse overtakes me, you must run." "No," I said simply. "If it overtakes you, I will follow you into the dark." He turned sharply toward me. "You don't know what that means." "Yes," I said. "It means love is not a bargain, it's a promise." He said nothing more, but when I closed my eyes, I felt his hand brush mine. Just once. A fragile human touch, in a place that had forgotten the warmth of both. And in that silence, I realized the truth. This was no longer just a sacrifice. It was the beginning of something greater than destiny. Something worth breaking any curse for. Dawn was a rumor here, not a sight. No sunlight reached the fortress, yet I could feel its ghost pressing faintly against the stone. The curse had thinned. The air was less bitter, the shadows less hungry. For the first time I dared to believe the darkness might someday lift. Kyle had grown quieter since the attack. At times, he would stare at the far wall for hours, his jaw set, his eyes distant. The black veins that coiled faintly beneath his skin seemed to fade and flare with his thoughts, like a tide he could not control. "You are somewhere else," I said one evening, when the silence became unbearable. He looked up slowly, his face caught between guilt and weariness. "I hear them still," he murmured. "The voices. The ones I couldn't save." "The soldiers from the war?" He shook his head. "Not just them. The villagers I failed. The friends who turned away. The curse binds more than my flesh. It feeds on regret." I moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. The cold of his skin was less biting now, as though he was relearning warmth. "Regret can be starved," I said softly, "but not by silence." He met my eyes, and for a heartbeat the mask broke. "You think you can heal me, Layla, but healing is for the living." "Then start by living," I whispered. Days bled into one another, measured not by sunlight, but by the rhythm of our work. Together we restored the old hall, sweeping dust, rebuilding the fire pit, mending what the centuries had forgotten. Kale taught me to wield a sword. "In case the shadows rise again," he said. And I taught him to laugh at the absurdity of trying to bake bread with no yeast. It burned, of course, but his smile that day was worth the smoke. At night, he told me stories of the valley before the curse. "The river used to sing," he said once, staring at the flame. "You could hear it from the hills when the moon was high. I thought the sound would never end." "And now?" I asked. He tilted his head, listening to the faint drip of water in the tunnels. "Now I hear it only in my dreams. But lately, the dreams have changed. There's light in them." "Then we're closer," I said. He smiled faintly. "Or the curse is growing desperate." It happened on the 41st night after our vow. I woke to the sound of chains. Not metal ones, but the heavy, dragging sound of something ancient moving in the dark. Kyle was gone from the bed. The fire had burned low, its last coals glimmering like dying stars. "Kale?" I called, rising. No answer. I followed the sound through the corridor until it opened into a vast chamber I had never seen before. The air there was colder, and the walls were etched with runes that pulsed faintly red. In the center knelt Kyle, his back arched, hands clenched against the floor. Dark tendrils crawled over his skin like veins of smoke. "Stay back," he growled, voice hoarse. "It's not me, it's the curse." I ran to him anyway, catching his face in my hands. His eyes were not his. They burned with the same red as the runes. The darkness hissed, curling up my arms like fire. It wanted me. It wanted everything. "Layla, you have to run," he gasped. "I told you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't run from you." Then I kissed him. The world exploded in light. It wasn't gentle or golden. It was raw, furious, holy. The darkness screamed as though pierced by its own reflection. The runes shattered, flaring white. Kale convulsed, a cry torn from somewhere deep inside him. I held on until the chamber itself began to collapse. When it was over, I was lying on cold stone, smoke rising from my skin. Kale knelt beside me, trembling, eyes clear for the first time since I'd met him. "Layla," he whispered, touching my face as if afraid I'd vanish. "You broke the binding." I managed a faint smile. "You make it sound like mending a tear." "You don't understand," he said. "That part of the curse was sealed by the sorcerer's own blood. No mortal could have undone it. Then it seems you married a very stubborn mortal." He laughed then, a real laugh, rough and cracked but alive. And in that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't the bond of pity or duty. It was something deeper, fiercer. Love, forged in defiance. That night, as we lay side by side, the air seemed different, lighter, almost fragile. Kale traced the scar on my palm where our blood had mingled weeks ago. "Every vow has a price," he said. "What will yours be?" I looked at the faint light filtering through the cracks above us. "If my price is loving you, I'll pay it gladly." He didn't answer, but when he pressed his forehead to mine, I felt the tremor of his heart, a heart long silent, now learning to beat again. Outside the mountain sighed. The curse had weakened, but deep within its core, I could feel something still waiting. A shadow older and angrier than any spell. It would come for us soon. And when it did, love alone might not be enough. The mountain never slept, but that night, it shivered. A tremor rippled through the stones, soft at first, then sharp enough to scatter dust from the ceilings. The air grew heavy, carrying a scent I hadn't smelled since childhood. Rain upon iron. Kyle was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, his sword half drawn. "It's stirring," he said, voice low. "The curse feels cornered. When darkness is trapped, it calls to its master." "The sorcerer?" I whispered. Kyle nodded. "The one who cursed me. His body died on the battlefield, but his shadow didn't. What we've broken here must have woken him." The thought stole my breath. "Then he's coming for you." No, Cal said grimly. He's coming for us. The next day, the fortress grew colder. Frost laced the walls, though no winter wind could reach this deep. The torches dimmed without reason. Even the fire sputtered, refusing to burn bright. It was as if the mountain itself feared to breathe. Kyle spent the morning reforging his sword. I watched him work. Every strike of the hammer echoed like thunder against the stone. The air shimmered faintly around him. The remnants of the curse pulsed beneath his skin, warning him, testing him. When he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, I asked, "Will a sword help us against a ghost?" He met my gaze. "Not the sword. The man who wields it." I must remember who I was before the curse. I walked closer and placed my hand over his. "You are not that man anymore. You're something greater." He looked down at me, eyes softening. "And you," he murmured, "are far braver than you should be." "I'm only brave because I've forgotten how to be afraid," I said, smiling faintly. But deep inside, fear still whispered my name. That night, I dreamt of fire. I stood upon the battlefield of Kale's past. The sky red, the earth drowned in ash. In the distance, a figure cloaked in shadow turned toward me. His face was hidden, but his voice slithered through the smoke. "You took what was mine, child of light. He was meant to fall. You cannot love what I made to hate." I tried to speak, but my words turned to dust. "He will choose," the voice hissed. "When I rise again, he will remember what he was, and you will burn for it." I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat. Cal was already there, his hand on my shoulder. "Another dream?" he asked. I nodded, trembling. "He spoke to me. The sorcerer. He said you'll have to choose." Kyle's eyes darkened. "Then it's begun. The Shadow King is clawing his way back." We spent the following days preparing. Kyle trained me with relentless focus. Blade against blade, strike and counterstrike. He said the shadows would test both of us, not just him. I learned to move through the dark, to listen rather than look. "You fight with your heart," he said once, catching my wrist mid-swing. "That's dangerous." "Then teach me to fight with yours," I replied, and for a moment the weight of prophecy lifted, replaced by something far more fragile and far more human. As we trained, I saw flashes of the man he used to be, the leader, the protector, the warrior whose courage had once saved kingdoms. The curse had twisted him, but it had never broken that core. I began to understand. Redemption was not the end of suffering. It was surviving through it. The storm came on the seventh night. The air roared like 1,000 drums. Shadows erupted from the cracks of the mountain, swirling, shrieking, gathering in the central hall. I stood at Kale's side as the temperature plunged. Frost crept over my boots. And then he appeared. The Shadow King. A figure draped in tattered darkness, taller than any mortal, his face a hollow mask of smoke. His voice filled the hall, smooth as silk, cruel as fire. "Kyle," he purred, "my lost creation. You broke your chains only to forge new ones? This mortal girl, she bleeds light. You could have ruled with me, yet you kneel beside her." Kyle lifted his sword. "I knelt to you once. Never again." The sorcerer laughed, the sound splintering the air. "You think you love her? You think that word will save you?" He turned his gaze toward me and I felt the weight of it, cold, endless. "You carry his doom, girl. The curse was woven from my soul. It will not die unless one of you does." "Then take me," I said, voice shaking but sure. "Leave him." Kyle's roar silenced the hall. "No!" The Shadow King smiled. "Ah, so it begins." And as the mountain shuddered beneath us, I realized the prophecy's cruel truth. The curse could only be broken by sacrifice. One of us would not live to see the dawn. The mountain bled shadows for 3 days. No dawn broke through the clouds, no bird dared to cry. The valley below must have sensed it, the stillness, the unholy calm before the storm. From the broken window of the fortress, I saw nothing but the sea of black fog curling around the cliffs like a living tide. Cale hadn't slept since that night. He paced the hall in silence, armor gleaming faintly in the torchlight, his jaw set as if carved from stone. I could feel the distance growing between us, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of what he might become. "Speak to me," I pleaded one evening, when his silence became unbearable. He stopped, his eyes haunted. "If what the Shadow King said is true," he murmured, "then every breath I take endangers you. Every heartbeat is another chain between us. The curse was bound to my soul. For it to end, one of us must die." I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my gaze. "You've already died once, Kyle. Don't let the curse take what's left of you." He laughed bitterly. "You think death was the curse?" "No, Layla. Living without light. That was the punishment." "Then let me be your light," I whispered. Something broke in his expression. He took my face in his hands, his touch trembling. "If you are my light, then I am the shadow that will consume you." "Then let's burn together," I said. That night I could not sleep. The fortress hummed with strange energy, like a heart preparing to stop. I wandered through the halls and found myself before the altar where we had first spoken our vows. The red cloth we had used still lay there, frayed but unbroken. When I touched it, the air shifted. A voice, not the Shadow King's, but softer, older, filled the silence. "Child of mercy," it said, "you stand at the heart of his curse. The spell was forged in betrayal. Only truth can unmake it." "Truth?" I whispered. "What truth?" "The curse was never his alone," the voice replied. "The sorcerer bound a piece of Cale's own guilt to it. To break it, he must forgive himself. But love will show him how." The air stilled. The voice faded. And I understood. Kyle was not chained by magic, but by the memory of his failure. At dawn, or what passed for dawn in this forsaken place, I found him standing on the fortress wall, looking toward the valley. His armor was unbuckled, his sword sheathed. "I remember now," he said before I could speak. "The night of the curse, the battle, the fire." He turned to me, eyes hollow with pain. "It wasn't the sorcerer who doomed me, Layla. It was me." He told me then, the truth that had festered like a wound. During the final battle, Cale had been ordered to retreat, but he refused. Pride blinded him. He led his men into an ambush. Hundreds died before the sorcerer's spell struck. "I thought I was fighting for glory," he said, his voice breaking. "But I was only fighting for myself. When the curse came, I welcomed it. I thought I deserved it." I stepped forward and touched his chest, where the darkness still pulsed faintly beneath the skin. "Then forgive the man you were," I said. "He's not standing here anymore." He looked at me as if I had spoken a miracle. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," I said, "but love rarely is." The ground trembled again, the Shadow King's laughter echoing through the walls. "So the truth is found," the voice thundered, filling every crack of the fortress. "But truth without sacrifice is hollow." The hall split open in a surge of black fire. Cale drew his sword, pulling me behind him. The Shadow King emerged, vast and terrible, his form writhing like a storm-made flesh. "You cannot fight what you are," he roared. Kyle stepped forward. "Then I will fight for what I choose to be." He struck, steel against darkness. The hall exploded in light and sound. Every blow echoed like thunder. Every step burned the floor. I could feel the pull, the curse screaming to reclaim him. But I remembered the voice. Only truth can unmake it. So I ran to him, shouting over the roar, "Kyle, forgive yourself. You are not his weapon. You are mine." He faltered just for a moment, and in that heartbeat, the shadow pierced his chest. "No!" I screamed, catching him as he fell. The Shadow King laughed, triumphant, but Kale smiled faintly through the pain. I see now. It was never about ending the curse. It was about freeing my soul. His hand found mine. Layla, live for both of us. And then he drove his sword through his own heart, and through the heart of the Shadow King. Light swallowed everything. When the silence returned, the fortress was gone. The mountain was clean, washed by dawn for the first time in centuries. I knelt alone on the grass where the ruins once stood, Kale's red cloth in my hands. The valley below shimmered with new life. I wept, not for what I lost, but for what he had given me. Proof that love, even when born in darkness, could still create light. And from the wind, I thought I heard his voice, gentle, unbound. You freed me, Layla. Now free yourself. When I awoke, the world was no longer black. The sky stretched wide above me, not the pale gray of morning, but true blue, streaked with rose and gold. I lay in the grass where the fortress once stood, my palms pressed to the earth, feeling it tremble with life. Dew kissed my cheeks. The air carried the scent of pine and wild flowers. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. Then I remembered the sword, the light, and Kale's final breath. The mountain had been reborn. The ruins were gone, swallowed by green. The curse that had wrapped itself around this land for generations had dissolved, leaving silence in its wake. But in that silence, his absence screamed. I rose slowly, my body weak, my heart a hollow ache. In my hand the red cloth fluttered, the same strip we'd bound our vows with. It was clean again, no blood, no ash. Only the faint warmth of his touch lingered. Kale, I whispered, and the wind answered softly through the trees, carrying a whisper I almost thought was him. You freed me. The path down to the valley had changed. The cliffs, once sharp with shadow, were now veined with light. Water poured from cracks long dry, catching the morning like glass. As I walked, I passed signs of rebirth. Saplings breaking through rock, birds singing from branches that hadn't held life in years. Every step felt heavier, not from fatigue, but from knowing that I walked alone now. I had come to this mountain to save my people. I left it carrying the soul of the man who had saved me. By the time I reached the edge of the village, the bells were ringing. The first time they had rung in months. The villagers gathered in awe, pointing toward the clear sky where the perpetual cloud had finally lifted. Elder Samir saw me first. His lips parted in disbelief. Layla, he breathed. Child, what have you done? I tried to answer, but words trembled and broke. My knees gave way, and they caught me as though catching a fallen prayer. Through blurred tears I saw their faces. No longer hollow, no longer gray. The curse was gone. Life had returned. Yet my heart, I realized, would never fully leave that mountain. In the days that followed, they rebuilt what had been lost. The river ran clean again. The wheat rose green and tall, and laughter returned to the markets. Children no longer feared the dark. They called me the bride of the cursed warrior, a title I bore with both pride and sorrow. At night, I climbed the hill that overlooked the valley and spoke to the wind. Do you see it? I would ask. Your people live again, and sometimes, just sometimes, the wind would grow warm, brushing my cheek like a hand that remembered love. One evening, as the stars bloomed over the hills, Elder Samir joined me. He stood silent for a time before saying, They will sing of you, Layla, of the girl who wed a monster and freed the dawn. I smiled faintly. He was never a monster, only a man who carried too much pain. Samir nodded. Then you must teach them that truth. Years passed. Seasons folded over each other like pages in an old prayer book. The valley flourished, and the story of the cursed warrior became legend. Yet to me, it never was just a tale. It was a heartbeat, echoing through time. I built a small shrine where the fortress once stood, a circle of stone crowned with wildflowers, At its center I placed the red cloth, now faded to rose, wrapped around the broken hilt of Kale's sword. Travelers who passed would stop to whisper wishes into the wind, saying that the warrior's spirit still listened, guarding the valley he had once doomed. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I still felt him, not as shadow, not as memory, but as warmth in my chest, a reminder that love does not end when the body falls. Love becomes the light that lingers. One evening, when my hair had turned silver and the stars burned low, I stood before the shrine one last time. "I kept my promise," I said. "Our people live in peace." The air stirred, the candles flickered, and in that soft moment between breath and silence, I heard him, clear as the first dawn. "And I kept mine. I will always walk beside you, Layla, in every shadow that tries to return." I smiled through my tears. The world glowed like a sunrise held in endless pause. I knew then that death had never claimed him. It had only set him free. From that day, the valley came to be known as the Valley of Dawn, where night was once endless, and a single vow between a cursed warrior and a girl of light brought back the morning. And in every sunrise that touched those hills, there was a whisper, soft and eternal. Love is the only magic stronger than any curse. Seasons turned, and the world moved on, but legends never sleep. Years after Kale's sacrifice, travelers began to whisper about a shrine hidden in the folds of the mountains, where dawn seemed to linger longer, and shadows dared not cross. They said if you listened closely to the wind, you could hear a voice, not in words, but in warmth, that could mend even the heaviest hearts. That shrine was mine. I tended it as one tends a wound that has become part of the body, gently without expecting it to close. My hair had long since silvered, and my hands carried the tremor of years, yet each morning I walked the same path up the hill. I laid wildflowers on the altar, polished the stone that bore no name, and tied new strips of red cloth for those who sought blessing. They came from villages near and far, farmers whose crops had failed, soldiers returning from war, mothers who had lost their sons. I would listen, offer tea, and tell them the same truth Kale had taught me. No curse is stronger than the love that endures it, and sometimes, when they left, their faces shone a little brighter, not because their pain was gone, but because they believed it could still mean something. One autumn, a child came alone, barefoot, thin as a reed, eyes wide with both wonder and hunger. He lingered at the edge of the shrine until I spoke. "Who sent you, little one?" He shook his head. "No one. The wind did." I smiled at that. "Then the wind must love you very much." He climbed the stone steps, small hands brushing the walls as though feeling for a heartbeat. "They say a cursed warrior once lived here," he said softly. "But my mother says he wasn't cursed. He was chosen." "She is wise," I said. "And what do you think?" He looked at the red cloths fluttering in the breeze. "I think he must have loved someone very much." I felt the ache return, soft and familiar. "He did," I said. "So much that his love still protects us." The boy tilted his head. "Do you miss him?" "Every day," I whispered. He frowned in thought, then reached into his pocket and placed something on the altar. A small carved bird, rough but carefully made. "So he won't be lonely," he said. When he left, I wept. For all the years that had passed, I had never imagined love could echo so far, finding new hearts to live in. That night, I dreamed of the valley as it once was. The fields golden, the river bright, Kyle standing at the edge of the dawn. But this time he turned toward me, smiling, whole and unshadowed. The light did not hurt him anymore. "Why do you still linger, my love?" he asked gently. "Because they still need me," I said. He nodded. "Then stay a little longer. But remember, the curse that once chained me has not vanished. It sleeps. And one day, When darkness seeks to rise again, they will need your story. When I woke, my cheeks were wet with tears, and the first snow of winter was falling. I knew what I must do. I began to write, on parchment gathered from the traders who passed through the valley. I wrote our story, not as legend, not as fable, but as truth. I wrote of the night the stars hid, of the vows made in shadow, of the love that turned sacrifice into salvation. Each word felt like weaving light back into the world. When I finished, I placed the scroll within a sealed jar and buried it beneath the altar. When the world forgets, I whispered, let this remind them what love can do. Years later, the child who had once brought the wooden bird returned as a grown man. He carried a sword at his side and the calm gaze of someone who had seen battle. When he knelt at the shrine, I saw the faint shimmer of light about him. The same light that had once danced around Kale. Are you his blood? I asked. He smiled. No, but I am his legacy. His courage runs in all who still believe. He looked out across the valley where dawn was spilling gold over the river. They say the light here never fades, he said quietly. It doesn't, I replied. Because it was born from love. He bowed deeply before leaving. And as he walked down the path, I realized something beautiful. Kale's story no longer belonged to me. It belonged to everyone who chose hope over despair. That night, as I sat by the altar, the wind rose, soft, familiar, filled with a voice that felt like a heartbeat. You kept your promise, Layla. I smiled, closing my eyes. And you kept yours. The red cloths rustled in the wind, glowing faintly in the moonlight. And for the first time in many years, I no longer felt alone. The world had changed, yes, but love remained. It whispered still through the valley, through every heart that remembered. Darkness may return, but the light we create will always outlast it. Time has a strange way of folding upon itself. Centuries passed since Layla's last breath, yet her name lingered on every wind that crossed the valley of dawn. The villagers said her spirit still walked beneath the willows at dusk, her red cloth trailing behind her like a flame that refused to die. Her shrine had grown over the years. What was once a circle of stones became a sanctuary. Marble pillars entwined with vines, an altar carved from the very heart of the mountain. Travelers from distant lands came seeking healing. Lovers came to pledge their vows, and warriors came to pray for courage. They called it the Shrine of Two Hearts. And though the world had changed, kingdoms rose and fell, rivers shifted course, the light of the valley never dimmed. Until the night the stars fell again. It began with a storm unlike any other. The sky split open with silver fire, and from its heart descended a shadow. Not black, but crimson, a color that spoke of blood and warning. When it touched the ground, the valley trembled, and every lantern flickered out. The next morning, the priests found the shrine untouched but cold, the air around it heavy with dread. Upon the altar lay a single feather, dark as coal and warm to the touch. Some said it was a sign. Others said it was a curse returned. Among those who saw it was a young woman named Erin. She was no noble's daughter, a farmer's child, wild-haired and quick to laugh, but her eyes were the same color as Layla's, soft gold when the light touched them. She had grown up listening to the old stories of the warrior and his bride, of love that conquered death itself. She used to sneak away at night to whisper her dreams to the shrine, believing the wind carried her words to the heavens. When she saw the feather, she felt something stir inside her, not fear, but recognition, as if some echo deep within her blood had awakened. That night she dreamed of a man wrapped in shadow, standing upon the ruins of a fortress she had never seen. His eyes glowed faintly, not with malice, but with sorrow. The world forgets, he said, and when love is forgotten, the curse is reborn. Erin woke with her heart pounding. In the following days, strange things began to happen. The river near her village ran dark, and livestock refused to drink from it. The wheat turned pale, and a chill crept through the air though it was midsummer. The elders whispered that the darkness that once claimed Kyle was stirring again, searching for a vessel. Aaron tried to dismiss it as old superstition, but one evening, while walking home through the fields, she saw a figure at the edge of the forest, a man in armor, motionless, watching her. When she blinked, he was gone, but his voice lingered in the wind. The vow remains unfinished. She ran all the way home, clutching the feather she had kept hidden in her pocket. When she placed it upon her table, it pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. That night, she dreamt again. The dream took her to the shrine, but this time it was shrouded in mist. The air shimmered, and from within the fog, a woman appeared. Tall, graceful, her hair like threads of silver light. Aaron knew her instantly, though she had never seen her before. "Layla," she breathed. The spirit smiled gently. "You carry our legacy, child." "Why me?" Aaron asked. "I'm no warrior. I'm no savior." "You are both," Layla said, "because love runs in every soul that dares to choose light over despair. The curse was broken once, but not destroyed. It sleeps within the heart of the world, waiting for the moment it can be forgiven." "Forgiven?" Aaron frowned. "By who?" Layla's gaze softened, but her voice trembled with sorrow. "By the one who was never freed." The dream shattered into wind and feathers. Aaron woke to find her window open, moonlight spilling over her bed. On the windowsill lay a sword, blackened with age, etched with runes she couldn't read. The same sword, she realized, that Kale had once wielded, and though she didn't understand how, she knew her life would never again belong only to her. The second curse had begun, not as punishment, but as inheritance. Somewhere in the whispering dark beyond the valley, a voice stirred, neither man nor monster, calling her name as gently as a memory. Aaron. The valley slept beneath a crimson dawn. Mist curled over the fields like breath, and the wind carried the low hum of something awakening. Not evil, not holy, but ancient. The shrine bells tolled without hands to ring them. Aaron stood at the altar, her fingers tracing the carved symbols that time itself had softened. The sword Kale once wielded rested across her palms, light trembling along its edge like a heartbeat waiting to begin again. In the distance, thunder rolled through the mountains. Slow, steady, like footsteps. The darkness was coming. The villagers had already fled. The crops wilted overnight, and the river had turned to glass. Every sound seemed to echo too long, as though the world itself feared to speak. But Aaron stayed. Something deep within her, something older than fear, told her that running would only call the shadow faster. When the first tendrils of mist darkened, she raised the sword. From the swirling fog a figure emerged, tall, silent, and wearing armor that flickered between black and silver. His face was half hidden beneath a hood, but his eyes burned like dying stars. "You shouldn't have come," he said. The voice was deep, aching, familiar. Her breath caught. "Kyle?" He stepped forward and the wind shivered around him. "No," he said. "Not Kyle. What remains of him?" The curse had remade him once more, but not as a monster of rage. This time he was a guardian bound to the curse itself, chained between life and death. "You are his echo," she whispered. He nodded. "And you are hers." His gaze softened. "Layla's blood runs through you, doesn't it?" "I don't know," Aaron said. "Only that her voice called me here." "Then destiny repeats itself," he murmured. The light seeks the shadow once more. They circled each other like memory and flame. "The Shadow King rises again," Kale's echo said. "The curse has fed on forgotten love, on centuries of disbelief. It will devour the world unless you sever it at its heart." "And where is its heart?" Aaron asked. He looked at her sword. the same one he had once thrust through his own chest. "You already carry it. It only needs truth." She tightened her grip. "Then help me." He hesitated. "If I fight beside you, I may never find peace. My soul was meant to rest, but your calling wakes me." "Then wake," she said fiercely. "Just once more." A flicker of warmth passed over his face, the ghost of a smile. "You sound like her." The storm broke. The Shadow King rose from the mountain's spine, a colossal silhouette made of flame and memory, his laughter shaking the heavens. His voice clawed at the air. So, the story begins again. The bride, the blade, the fool who loved too much. Aaron stepped forward. "Love is no foolish thing," he roared, the sound tearing the sky. "Love is weakness." "No," Kyle's echo said, his voice cutting through the thunder. "It is strength you will never understand." They charged together, mortal and spirit, light and shadow. Every clash sent waves of energy across the valley. The mountains screamed, trees turned to ash, rivers to steam. But in Aaron's heart, something greater than fear burned, the light of every vow ever made in love. The Shadow King struck Kale down with a scream that could have ended worlds. Aaron fell to her knees beside him. "No!" she cried, cradling his fading form. He reached for her hand. "The light must come from you now." She pressed her forehead to his. "Then you will see it through me." And she rose. The sword shone like a second sun. The red cloth bound around its hilt caught the wind, flaring like a banner. Aaron's tears glimmered as she lifted the blade, whispering the words that had once freed Kyle. "By love freely given, by darkness forgiven, let this curse find its rest." The light erupted from her chest, blinding, beautiful, infinite. When it faded, the Shadow King was gone. The mountains were still, the valley breathed again. And where Aaron had stood, there was only the red cloth, drifting gently down, glowing softly in the dawn. Generations later, when the people spoke of that day, they said two figures were seen walking into the sunrise. One of light, one of shadow, hand in hand. Some said it was Layla and Kale. Others swore it was Aaron and the guardian she had awakened. But the elders would smile and say, it was love itself, leaving to rest. And so the legend ended, not in tragedy, but in peace. The Valley of Dawn flourished, its light eternal. The shrine bells still ring each morning, carrying a whisper through the mist. Curses break, kingdoms fall. But love never dies.